I'm Sam Roberts of the New York Times. Welcome to the New York Times Close-Up. The Pulitzer Prize and Tony Award-winning screenwriter and playwright Tony Kushner never rests on his laurels. He doesn't seem to rest at all. He's profiled in this Sunday's Times Arts and Leisure section by Charles McGrath. His groundbreaking two-part play, Angels in America. New production is now in previews at the Neil Simon Theater. We'll talk to him about the play. It opens later this month. My Times colleagues join me for a look at this week's news, and there was plenty of it, on the backstory. And I'll have some further thoughts on Coda. But first, Tony Kushner, Angels in America. It first exploded into our consciousness 25 years ago. It took place during the Reagan era, the AIDS epidemic hiding in plain sight. Its theatricality exposing the raw truths of contemporary life. And now there's a new residence along with a new production. It's exciting theater goers all over again at the Neil Simon Theater. Again, the official opening March 25th. Tony, welcome and thanks for joining us. Why now? Why the production coming back now? So much has happened in the gay community. We now have gay marriage. Your wedding, in fact, was the first same-sex marriage featured in the vows section of the New York Times. Why do we have to be reminded through this play at this time?
Well, I mean, of course, it's always important to remember the things that have happened in the past. Keeping track of history, keeping an account of where we've been is the only possible way for us to figure out where we want to go and how we're going to get there. Amnesia about the past is a disastrous mistake for a society, and in fact, I think human society is impossible without a vibrant and dynamic relationship to the past. So to the extent that the play reminds people of what the 80s were like, what I call the twin plagues of Reaganism and the AIDS epidemic were like, what it was like being gay in the years before the progress that we've made was like, I'm very happy about that. But it's also, the play is not simply a post-it, it's not a reminder. It's a big, sprawling work. And I think it speaks to people about a lot of different things. And if part of its function is to explore the past, that's great. But I'm really happy that it seems to have, as you said in your introduction, a lot of resonance today. So that is why we're doing it.
One of the things that resonates, of course, is Donald Trump saying, "Where is my Roy Cohn?" Yeah. He had his Roy Cohn, and Roy Cohn featured in the play. How does that thread run through where we are today?
Well, I think that the play is a response to the AIDS epidemic, and it's my second play. It was
and to hypocrisy.
And yes. But it very much is about the beginnings of the Reagan counter-revolution. And I know that a lot of Republicans today say, oh, this thing that's happened since 2016, the Trump whatever it is a kind of alien visitation on the Republican Party. It's not what we ever intended. But of course, it's exactly what was intended. The entire heart and soul of Reaganism has been a degrading and belittling of the purpose and function of government. And if you do that for 30 or 40 years, you wind up with a madman like Donald Trump, a lord of misrule, who is, if anything, an ego-anarchist of the first order and somebody who really exists only to create chaos. So I think that that's part of the resonance. And the Roy Cohn-Donald Trump connection is an interesting one. I've said many times in the last few months that I think that Roy Cohn was actually a much better person than Donald Trump, which lets you know how really little I think of Donald Trump. But Roy was actually somebody who was capable of constancy of affection and loyalty. He was somebody who was capable of real friendship. He was a coherent personality. He did many monstrous things, but he was a sort of a recognizably coherent human being. He wasn't a borderline psychotic narcissist, like the man in the White House.
I'm so sorry he's not here to hear you say that. This is a play in two parts, as we said. It is a long play. When people leave the theater at the end of the play, what do you want them to leave thinking?
Oh gosh,
Or do you just want them to leave thinking?
I think that's a good way to put it. I want them to leave thinking. I don't think that I've never written a play with the idea in mind that it had a single message to deliver, because if I knew what the message was in advance, I'd just make everybody's life easier, including my own, by writing a short little essay or a fortune cookie. It's not, plays are generators of meaning. They're generators of questions. And the greatest pleasure I have as a theater goer is to encounter a work that throws me into a real tumult about the way that I perceive the world, the assumptions that I make that make it possible for me to perceive the world at all. I like to have those things upset, challenged, reinforced, and overturned at times. And I think that that's what theater at its best can do. It makes you always remember that reality is not simply a surface proposition, that there are things below the surface, that there's an artificiality, that the world is constantly asking us to read it and to interpret it, and to know that everything that's real is also not real, and the things that we believe are not real have a tremendous power, so much power, in fact, that they become real in a sense. That kind of doubleness, that dialectical spin is what I think theater gives. So I don't want an audience to have there's no message that they're supposed to, what I want them to all leave the theater with is do whatever we can to get the House and the Senate back in 2018 in November.
Okay, there's a message.
There's a message.
You say in the Times article that obviously theater is hard work for playwrights, but you say it's also hard work for audiences. Do audiences want to work hard when they go to the theater?
Oh yeah, I think so. I don't know why else anyone would ever go to the theater, because it's so much easier to stay at home and watch, Breaking Bad on your iPhone. It's a great work of art. It's Miltonian. You can just, sit with your iPad or watch it on your gigantic wall-sized television set and multitask and watch. Why does anybody ever really want to leave their apartment?
So what's the difference in the experience?
Well, the difference is that one is live and unreliable and not a commodity. And this is not to say anything bad about television. I love television. I love Breaking Bad. I revere it, and so many, The Wire and The Sopranos, and just I could go on and on and on. RuPaul's Drag Race. I think that there's great television, and I write movies, and I really love film. Theater is live. Part of the work that you have to do is that you're encountering in a world in which almost everything you encounter except other people is a commodity form that wants to reassure you that it's going to be reliable and eternal, and it'll give you everything you want, and your car will make you a more interesting person, and your iPhone will make you, travel the world or whatever. You go into the theater and you encounter something that no one has any control over, that's different every single night, that is remade because the actors will be slightly, in different places every night, and also the audience will be different, and the play is created in a dynamic interaction between audience and actor. That's not easy at this point. We feel a certain amount of tension and apprehension in it, and I think people have always felt that. An actor could forget their lines. If you hate the play, you feel bad for the actors, and who wants to have to expend that kind of energy feeling bad for a bunch of strangers who are getting paid to do what they do? But you still feel bad if you're a decent person. Or if you're loving the play, it's a lot. You can feel enormously complicated emotions, and I think that theater is meant to do all of that to you. I think we have an awareness that in the sense that it's uncontrollable, that it's never complete, that once it's gone forever. Theater is a great deal like life. It's a great deal like human consciousness. What we see on the stage is a lot like what goes on in our heads when we dream, and also in our heads when we think. The illusions that the theater makes are recognizable as illusions. They never completely work, which is different now from watching television or film, where the illusions are so perfect you can't always tell that what you're seeing is not real. the readability of theater's illusions is part of its enormous importance. And also I think Angels is really good for this, when you sit in a room with an audience for 3.5 hours, 4 hours, or if you watch the whole thing in one day, 7 hours, you get a strong sense of having joined a community that didn't exist before. And community building is also essential to human life, and so I think theater gives us that.
George Wolfe, the director, said the only time he heard you answer a question with 2 words was when you got married and you said, "I do." You have been known to drive directors crazy. What do you do now? You've written the play. It's now in previews. It's going to open the end of the month. What do you do as the writer, and how much can you do, and when do you let go?
Oh, never. I mean, I let go in the sense that I don't get involved deeply in every production of Angels, but the National was where it started, so I was involved in the production there. Coming back to Broadway is obviously a major event for me. When it was the Signature Theater in 2010, New York is my hometown. It's a very New York play, and I really want to be involved in those productions. If it's a production of a new play, I'm very deeply involved. Marianne Elliott, who directed it and did a spectacular job, really encouraged me from the beginning. I mean, she called and called. She worked on the play for over a year just preparing it. So we had a really wonderful back and forth. And then I just kept going. And she actually asked me on several occasions.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, exactly. She asked me several times to look at a few things in Perestroika, the second part of Angels in America, to think about cuts, to think about some changes for clarification. I thought her notes were really good, so I did that. So it's a different version than was at the National now, and that requires me to show up and listen and make little tweaks because the material is a little bit new. But I'm excited about that. I've rewritten the play, only the second half of Angels, but I've rewritten that 3 or 4 times, not because anything's wrong with it, I think, but it's just one of those plays that's always sort of available for experimentation.
How do you know when it's done, when it's perfect, when it's cooked?
Well, perfect is a big word. I don't know. It's a mystery. About half the plays I've written just sort of say at some point, I'm done. I listen to the first part of Angels over and over again, and I have for 30-something years now, and nothing new ever occurs to me. It's just like, this is what Mike Nichols had an expression when he showed me a rough cut of the film, and I told him how much he loved it. He said, well, this is what I meant. And you get the sense, okay, that's it. But then some plays that I've written, every time I look at them, I think, oh, what if I move this scene here and this scene there? What if I get rid of these lines? And Goethe had, when he was going through all of his plays, preparing them for the collected works, he had a handful of his plays that he called his incommensurables, which is, I think, exactly right. There's a kind of disequilibrium inside the play that means that it will never be completely finished. And the bigger and the more sprawling it is, I think the truer that is.
Tony, is it easier then to write a movie where, once the shooting is over, once the editing is finished, there it is, and presumably you can't touch it again, and
No.
you've done your best, and
it's
that's
not,
it?
and the writing isn't yours. I mean, when I write a movie for Steven Spielberg, the studio owns the script, and even though Steven has always been an incredibly generous collaborator and really let me, give my opinion, there's never been any doubt. He's Steven Spielberg, it's his film. The director is really the author. I don't go into the editing room with him, nobody does.
Do you hate that?
No, I actually really love it. What you said is the one hard thing, is that you work on a scene and you come up with a scene that you think is really good, and then they film it, and unlike a play, it's done. The way they filmed it, nobody's going to refilm your screenplay. That's very different from writing a play. But I was talking to, I think Sally Field about this when we were filming Lincoln, and she said, but of course actors feel the same way too. It's like you feel shattered after every day's filming. Probably Steven feels that way. It's just, you always have a fantasy that this will be this perfect thing, and then it meets reality. But in film, one after another, they just go in the opera.
Only so many do-overs.
Yeah.
Thanks to Tony Kushner for joining us. Angels in America, Parts 1 and 2, the Neil Simon Theater on West 52nd Street. My Times colleagues join us for the backstory in a moment. Welcome back. The week was as stormy and unpredictable as the weather. The president insisted he enjoyed chaos, but the stock market was mighty jumpy. We have another new schools chancellor, and the actress and schools advocate Cynthia Nixon says she's seriously considering running against Governor Cuomo. Joining me to discuss these stories and more, my Times colleagues, contributing writer Eleanor Randolph, Metro education reporter Kate Taylor, and City Hall Bureau reporter William Newman. Willie, tell us about Cynthia Nixon. Is she, in fact, serious? And is Governor Cuomo afraid that she might be serious?
Well, it's all on the level of sort of will she or won't she. We know that she's consulted with some political consultants who are close to Mayor de Blasio. She is very close to the mayor. She's been a supporter of his for a long time. Her wife works in the Department of Education, but is often in City Hall. I sometimes see the two of them at City Hall. And the governor responded very aggressively this week to the rumors that she might be considering a challenge to him in the primary. And he laughed sort of maniacally when asked about it and asked whether the mayor was putting her up to it. And he said, well, it could be either that or Vladimir Putin. So it was an odd political...
You know,
another odd political moment.
yeah.
Eleanor?
I thought it was such a misstep on Cuomo's part, because by disparaging Cynthia Nixon, he made people who probably think she's okay, you know, saw her in Sex and the City or Little Foxes or something like that, would make them angry about the way he treated her. And it's just that he has that problem anyway. He sometimes looks mean. This came out as just plain nasty, I thought. And
Kate,
he
she
didn't
has
need
been
to do that.
a serious advocate for education, hasn't she?
Yeah, she's been involved in education issues in the city for some time, very much on the teachers' union side of things, advocating for funding for schools. That is certainly a platform she can run on, though not necessarily everybody in the education world would agree with her positions on things.
Tell us about the second new chancellor.
So yes, we got a second new chancellor. We hope this time it'll stick. His name is Richard Carranza. He's coming to us from Houston. He had been the runner-up in the initial chancellor pick, and so de Blasio had called him last week and said, sorry, we chose somebody else, and then 24 hours later had to call him back and say, actually, are you still interested? He meets a lot of the things that de Blasio was looking for. He is of Mexican heritage. He grew up in a Spanish-speaking household in Tucson, Arizona. Didn't learn English till he and his twin brother started elementary school. He comes from a working class background, so he certainly can relate to the challenges that a lot of families in New York City are facing. He's very passionate about issues of equity in education. He shares a lot of views with de Blasio and with the current Chancellor, Carmen Farina.
Willie, this is Women's History Month, and the mayor's wife, Charlene McRae, is apparently trying to make history, taking a bigger and bigger role as the first lady of the city. How are people reacting to that?
Well, she's become much more visible now in the second term. We see her at a lot of news conferences with the mayor, especially when it involves announcing new personnel picks, new hires, such as the chancellor. And how are people reacting? I guess all along, I mean, especially at the beginning of the first term, people reacted certain people reacted very aggressively towards her role.
And then she kind of faded back.
Yeah, now I would say that people are more used to her. I mean, it's a little bit of the idea that the Clintons had, you're getting a twofer. It came up this week when the mayor was asked about it, and he sort of became defensive about it and said, well, in fact, you know, she works so hard for New York City, she should get paid. Well, the nepotism laws don't allow her to get paid for good reason, and he said that should be revisited. That was.
Do you think she's running for office? Do you think she's
I don't
thinking
see her
like
as
Hillary?
having that drive. She doesn't seem comfortable in the spotlight. She's become more so. But she clearly has become much more visible. And it's possible that the mayor wants her by his side because just as he has used his family during his political campaigns, he still thinks of it that way.
Kate, one of the things the mayor has stressed is equity in education, and yet we reported this week that the specialized schools, the elite schools, only accepted about 10% minority students. Why is that?
Yeah, so about 10% Black and Hispanic students specifically, even
Right.
though Black and Hispanic students make up almost 70% of the kids in the school system as a whole. So to get into these 8 specialized high schools, students, it's based on a single test, a single day test, the specialized high schools admissions test. It requires people do a lot of preparation for it. And basically, so you have, the kids who have gone to the best elementary schools and the top middle schools, and then they do a lot of test preparation, and then they get into the school, whereas we have a very segregated school system, and many Black and Hispanic students are in low-income neighborhoods going to schools with predominantly low-income kids, which are generally low-performing schools. And so, why do they end up in a different place in 9th grade? Well, it's a story that started, before they even started kindergarten, with the opportunities and enrichment that they were or weren't getting at a very young age. It's going to be really interesting, by the way, to see what Carranza does about this. The new schools chancellor, he, in San Francisco, attracted some controversy and made some upper middle class parents angry because he got rid of honors classes in middle school and also established a policy that all students had to take algebra in 9th grade. No students could take algebra in 8th grade and take geometry in 9th grade. Everybody had to sort of be on the same track. And so it'll be interesting to see if he pushes the city a little bit in terms of these issues of equity.
Eleanor?
Well, I was going to say that I think to get rid of that test, which is one of the things that everybody talks about, or to make it so that the test is not everything, doesn't the mayor have to go to Albany to ask for permission?
So he definitely has to go to Albany to ask for permission to change the admissions process for the 3 original specialized high schools, Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, and Brooklyn Tech.
And probably doesn't want to be seen as lowering the standards either.
Right. Now, the interesting thing is that de Blasio, when he was a candidate in 2013, ran saying that he was going to change this. He said these schools aren't fair, they don't reflect the city, this is very important, and then he's basically done nothing about it. He hasn't even tried to get Albany to pass something. Now, there's some disagreement about whether he has to go to Albany to change the standards for 5 other smaller specialized high schools that were subsequently started. Most people have taken the position that the city could change that on its own. The city relatively recently has adopted the position that they can't even do that, which I think shows how reluctant they are to take this on.
That's fascinating. Thanks to my Times colleagues, Eleanor Randolph, Kate Taylor, and William Newman for joining us. I'll offer some final thoughts in a moment. Because I'm writing mostly obituaries for the Times these days, friends sometimes ask, why would I want to dwell on death? But the reality is, obituaries are about lives. Death is barely ever mentioned. Obituaries are short biographies. They're about people who were famous or should have been, who were transformational or who personified something transformative, or whose lives would have been grist for the likes of Edith Wharton or O. Henry. I've written about the first woman to climb Mount Everest, about Natalie Babbitt, who wrote Tuck Everlasting, a book about immortality. Who merits a news obituary in the Times is, of course, subjective. It always has been, although we'd like to think the hurdles have become less arbitrary. Luckily, journalism is only the first draft of history. The Times' send-off for Karl Marx was only 600 words long. James Dean eked out 133 when he died. Harriet Tubman, just 132. Charlotte Bronte's passing went unnoticed altogether. With Easter approaching, I wondered how the Times would have covered the death of Jesus at the time. Probably something modest. It might have begun by describing him as a Galilean carpenter turned itinerant minister whose appeals to piety and whose repute as a healer had galvanized a growing contingent of believers. It would have added that he was crucified just outside Jerusalem after his followers had welcomed him triumphantly as the Anointed One and the Son of David. It would have reported his age at about 33. The Times obit might have added that a day after he was buried nearby in a cave, his disciples reported that the body was missing. Who knew? They say the only things final are death and taxes. But this weekend, in a special section of the New York Times, we revisit the lives of 15 women. For whatever reason, in the last century and a half, when they died, their lives were overlooked by the Times. This first group includes only women, both to celebrate Women's History Month and to acknowledge a historic white male bias on the obituary pages. Even today, only about 1 in 5 Times News obituaries are of women. But as Bill McDonald, our obituary editor, explains, the latest reflect society's past, not the present. They mirror a generation or more behind the evolution of gender and racial advances we can celebrate this month. In the months to come, we'll add more who we overlooked. You can nominate your own choices at nytimes.com. They may be gone, but there's no longer any excuse for them to be forgotten. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Sam Roberts.